What a treat. What a treat. We have Madisun here today. And oh, yeah, Guy's here too. And I am so excited. I'm going to kick this off with a little story, and then we're going to talk about this. Um, every day I wake up and I have to remind myself how lucky I am. And one of the days when that pattern started, I was a little software company in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's 1986. And we're sort of struggling, and the computer industry is really struggling. The Commodore 64 was the state of the art. And we had this big open area, and I noticed someone walking across, and there's this energy field around them. And people are just drawn to this guy. He's in his 20s like me, but he's walking like he runs everything. And he's headed toward me. And I guess he's there because he wants to acquire a chess program that we had the rights to, but I don't know who he is. I just know there's this energy. And I'm 26 years old, and I look up and I meet the guy who's going to become a legend. And I have learned from afar so much from this guy, Guy Kawasaki. You can just call him Guy, and then you're covered, even if you forget his name. And he has another book. And Madisun probably did all of the work, but Guy's name is on the cover in very big letters. And we're here to talk about this. I'm going to just riff for a few minutes with them, and your comments are what is going to drive this forward. So just ask a question in the comments and we will get to it if we can. We're going to start. I'm just going to click this button. New technology today. Madisun, introduce yourself. Welcome. It's good to meet you.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Madisun and I've worked with Guy for a couple of years now. I produce his podcast, Remarkable People, and just co-authored Think Remarkable with him. And it's been all fun. Yeah. Happy to be here.
That happens. And then my friend Guy Kawasaki, tell us a little bit I'm going to give you like the 20-second window to talk about the arc from when I gave your career a start when we met to where we are now. You have done some extraordinary things.
Well, meeting you, Seth, was just the high point of my career at Apple. So I don't even remember being in that office, but wasn't the chess program named Sargon? Was that it?
Yes.
See, I can remember something. So those are the glory days of Macintosh evangelism. And oh, man, where did the years go, Seth? Where did the years and where did the hair go?
So what you pioneered, I did permission marketing. You pioneered the idea of evangelism.
Well, there was Jesus before me.
That's true. You stole some of that stuff. But the idea of connecting a community in service of advancing a marketing idea. And you have done it with care and grace. And you don't mind hustling too. But the idea of this book is being able to say to people, oh, what's the link, you might ask? What's the link? Right here. The idea of this book is for people with a short attention span. Oh, look, a puppy. Here is page by page crammed in there the checklists, the thoughts from lots of people. So Madisun, tell us a little bit about how you turned 200 podcasts into a book.
Yeah, so it first started off with Guy and I have transcripts for each of the episodes, and that accumulated to be 4,000 pages. And we printed that all off and went through one by one and took out pieces that we thought we could apply to the book. And that was kind of the basis of everything.
Okay. And is there a point of view? Because I know that like Guy and I are old and you are not. And it's, the book is dedicated to Gen Z. So what was that about?
Yeah, so we definitely tried to pick messages that we knew could relate to that generation. And, we had help too from a couple other people like Kelly Gibson, who gave us specific names that we reached out to that Gen Z would relate most with. But yeah, definitely tried to find the messages that we knew Gen Z could relate most with.
And Guy, what are you thinking about when you're like me entering your dotage? What's the goal here? What are we trying to pass on to people?
Well, basically, I want this book to withstand the test of time. It's not this topical book about, Elon Musk or the dirt of Silicon Valley. I think this book should live on for a long, long time. And my use case, my dream use case is that parents get this book and give it to their kids and say, you're not listening to me, so listen to Guy and Madisun, because they're telling you the same thing I'm telling you, but maybe you'll believe them.
So do you remember what you wrote in the book you inscribed to my son?
Inscribed to, like, what?
You wrote, you sent an autographed book to my son
Yeah.
18 years ago. And you wrote, Alex, listen to your dad.
And did he listen to me?
He has listened very well, and I'm very proud of what he's built. But I just thought it was funny that this keeps coming around. Okay, so I'm waiting for people to ask questions. And while they're coming in, I'm going to ask Madisun, what's one of the riffs you want to share from the book, an idea that you think is worth highlighting?
Yeah, so I think overall, the concept of grace is incredible in the book, and there is a whole section dedicated to it, but there are messages, in sprinkled into all the different chapters and sections. And I actually remember reading, like, on your blog last week, you put on there, like, people will remember you for your kindness, and it was like linked with your ebook Graceful. And yeah, I just think that's a message that's throughout the book that is definitely necessary, along with all the entrepreneurship and everything. So, yeah.
Got it. All right, here's our first question coming in. I'm going to let Guy go for it first. Can you see it there?
Yes, I do. So the question is, how do you stay motivating others constantly? And well, at one level, I still have 2 tuitions to pay for. So that's very tactical and practical. But listen, I think that the first third of your career, you're underpaid. The second third, you're overpaid. And the third third, you pay back. So I'm in the third, and I'm paying back. Madisun is underpaid right now. So I'm paying back. And I really, there's this concept of noblesse oblige, the obligations of the nobility. I hate the term nobility. So in this book, we coined the term success oblige. And I think that when you are successful, yes, it's due to your hard work and grit and growth, but it's also due to the work of your teachers and mentors and coaches and luck. So you have an obligation that when you're successful, you should have a duty to help other people become successful too. So to answer your question, I just think it's a moral obligation that I have accrued.
I love that. I think that luck doesn't get nearly enough credit, particularly in Silicon Valley. I know how lucky I have been, and I'm guessing you were pretty lucky too.
Very.
And you tell the story in the book of talking smack with Steve Jobs at the Shy Day meeting, and it could have just as easily gone a different way, right? Like there not a lot of people get away with saying, "I don't trust you either, Steve," and I'm not sure that I want to recommend that as a managing up technique, but all right, let's see what here. So how did you find your path? This is Alexander. This is a great question, but it's not a question for us. It's a question for the people in the comments. So please, I'll share it with people in case they want to see it. But I think that this idea of a path is worth talking about. So I'm going to put Madisun on the spot for a second. Do you, this early in your career, see a path yet? How are you making decisions about what's next for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like planting many seeds, that's actually a topic in our book, and, doing a bunch of different things, testing things out and seeing what sprouts over time. And yeah, I don't think a path is necessarily linear. And yeah, I think we can always like shift and change, but yeah, as long as we're like saying yes to many things and just experimenting, I think that's what's important.
Yeah, I think the path is much easier to see after the fact.
Exactly.
Right. Guy, can
That's
I ask
what
you a
Steve
couple?
said.
Can I ask you a couple surfing questions?
Oh, God.
So I know that you don't surf as much as you used to, but
What? I've told you
isn't it?
that. I surf more than ever.
Didn't you tell me your shoulders were really bothering you? Maybe
That's
it
why
was,
that's why God invented Advil.
maybe some other old guy who surfs told me that. So there's so many metaphors in the surfing thing, and what made me think of it was this idea of the path, right? Because you don't get to follow the line you see when the wave is coming in. You follow the line that you follow the line. What do you, other than joy, do you get when you're out on the waves? Does it help you see the impermanence, the cycles? Riff on that for a second.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, Seth, if I had discovered surfing earlier in my life, I started surfing at 60. If I had started it at, I don't know, 10 or 11 when I should have, I would not be in this conference right now. I would not have been a writer because surfing is the most fun you can legally have. And I surf every day. I am obsessed with surfing. Ask Madisun. And, Madisun, in addition to being a co-author, also helps me manage, just the logistics of my existence, really. And we have an algorithm for when Guy can be scheduled, which is always when the tide is high, because where we surf, high tide is the worst time to surf. So if you want to figure out when you can meet with me, look at the Santa Cruz tide chart.
So I want to talk a little bit about the fact that there's a difference between busyness and activity. And my interactions with you have always been focused on how efficient you are at activity, that you work on projects and they happen, but you don't feel busy because if it's low tide, you're out surfing. And I think a lot of people are confused about the difference between the two, and they think that busyness is a suitable substitute for actually producing something of value. How do you think about that?
Honestly, Seth, I don't think about it. I mean, just ask Madisun. I am obsessive compulsive, and I have killer instinct. And when I decide to do something, there is no stopping me. And the secret to my success, besides being lucky, is I am perfectly happy to grind it out. I can grind better than almost anybody I know. And you ask Madisun, like, Madisun, can I grind it out?
Yeah, and the work you do is quality too. You care about small details, so that's good.
So here's our next question. I'm going to let Madisun go first on this one. I have an opinion too.
Will AI take over book writing in the next 10 years? Wow, that's a really good question. I would like to think no. I would like to think that people can use AI as more of a research assistant for their book rather than writing it for them. I think writing is a beautiful art that like some people were naturally given and others have grown over time. So I'm hoping that people can keep writing books for themselves, but use AI maybe as a research assistant or just to generate ideas.
So here's a book that was at the time the highlight of my career in terms of effort. This is the Information Please Business Almanac and Source Book. This is every chart, every table, every graph, and the phone number of the Honolulu Public Library. Why? Because if it's 4:00 in the afternoon in New York or 6:00 and you need help, you can't call the local library because they're closed. You can call Honolulu because of the time zone. Anyway, this book was an enormous amount of effort. And then the internet came along and it was worthless because you could just type in 3 words and look it up. I don't think AI is going to replace most book writing in 10 years. I think it's going to replace most book writing in 10 months because most book writing that's showing up on the Kindle, long tail kind of stuff, isn't personal, vulnerable, powerful, based on a lifetime of experience, nor is it particularly well edited. It's just filling a gap. And just like we don't need almanacs anymore like this, what we're going to need is editors and people who will add a human voice. But just like Google made it, if you can look it up, you don't have to write it down. The same thing I think is true with AI. Okay, let me see if we're going to start wrapping this up, but I want to see if anybody else wants to come in with a question.
What do you mean we're going to start wrapping this? And we just got started.
Well, but here's the deal. The deal is, as we know, this Gen Z generation is very busy and they have a short attention span. And this book is short, and that's a benefit because you're in and then you're out.
Yeah, but Madisun
sorry.
and I are particularly fascinating, so we can go longer.
Okay. I'm putting Guy on the screen. Be fascinating, please. Here's a question for you.
You mentioned you are someone who can grind. How do you know when to stop chasing? Well, usually my wife just tells me when to stop chasing. That's the fallback position. You know, I have to tell, seriously, I just love to work. I'm 69 years old. You know, a lot of my peers, their idea of living is watching Fox all day. And don't get me wrong, I love to watch YouTube, but I love to work. And, you know, I'm thinking of the next book already. I haven't told Madisun that yet. So, and I, you know, one of the benefits of the Remarkable People podcast is that we interview 52 people a year. And so that means we have to become experts on 52 topics a year. And we go from, you know, playing free safety in the NFL to cooking fusion with Andrew Zimmern to primatology with Jane Goodall to spinal injury recovery. And I swear to God, I think that the Remarkable People podcast and then this book is going to at least delay dementia in me.
Okay. And Madisun, I got a question for you. Hold on. From William.
What do you think can be done to bridge the generational gaps? That's really good. I think more conversation and interaction with the youth, with the older generations could be really important, and doing that in a way where they're like hearing each other out and not just like having arguments or fighting, but yeah, continuing to have an open mind and seeing each other's sides. And I mean, this is like something from my college degree, but you look at like other cultures and they're really close with like the older generations. And I think like having more of that could be really important.
And how, when you hear a Guy talking about grinding and loving to work, there's a characterization of a generation coming along that says, screw this. The world is going to end soon anyway. Life's too short. Is there friction around that for the two of you? Or are you an outlier, or am I mischaracterizing a generation here?
No, I definitely do see a little bit of a difference, and it's not, I would say, a negative one on either side. But Guy does love to work, and he loves what he does too, which I think is a really beautiful thing. And like, there are times when like we talk about boundaries, right? And like, that is something I think with my generation where it's like, okay, like on the weekends, maybe let's not like be as in touch. Like I need the weekend to like reset and digest, but Guy's like open to always working, which I think is a beautiful thing. But that's one thing I've seen for me personally in like my generation is people like having maybe like stricter boundaries and more of a work-life balance. But Guy supports that all the time anyways. He's super flexible and always encouraging me to surf even on the work week. So
Well, that's just because he's on the call with us. You know, I think that it's very easy to get trapped into a media circus around the difference between generations. But I do think it's important to understand the people who influence us the most are our friends and our peers. And if you spend 20 years growing up with a group of people, they're going to have a different life experience. That if you grew up with a smartphone that has access to everything in the world, you're different than someone who didn't. And we're going to keep seeing these cycles occur. With the Carbon Almanac, we named the idea of Generation C because we think that the narrative of people who are coming of age now for the rest of their lives is going to be how we're going to deal with climate. But that's neither here nor there.
Can I add something here, Seth?
Yes, please do.
I think that nostalgia is overrated. And basically, every generation believes that they worked harder in their time than the current generation. And I would use as a metaphor music, right? So I'm going to go on the line right now, and I'm going to tell you that someday people are going to be saying, "Oh, the good old days when people had talent and they could sing and there were great lyrics." Like, where are the great artists like Justin Bieber? Because, we say that about Justin Bieber and this generation. And then my father was saying, who are these people from England? They like got their long hair and they're jumping up and down on Ed Sullivan's stage like nutcases.
Yeah.
And, right now we look back and Michael Jackson is the classic. And in his time, my parents hated him. And I think this is the same thing about work. We always think we worked harder than we did. And the current generation works less hard than we did in, the good old days with people putting in all those 40 to 60 hours, and we never took time off. And this generation, they're trying to work remotely from Bali and Belize and Costa Rica. I'm like, what the hell's the matter with them?
Get off my lawn, kid. All right. So we have this great question from Alexander. I'm going to let Guy answer it.
Oh, is this for me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I found Madisun. I did an extensive search through LinkedIn and viewed thousands of resumes. I looked at their qualifications. I checked their college transcripts. I talked to their professors. I talked to their former bosses. I gave them the Myers-Briggs test. I tested their IQ. I had their DNA checked. I did all that, and I arrived at Madisun. Now, if you believe that, God bless you. But the way it really happened was I was out surfing one day and I needed help. And I said, these young people, I know they're commuting from Santa Cruz to their jobs and they're telling their bosses they're working 8 hours a day. They're really surfing. So I'm going to just ask a few if they have some spare cycles and can help me. And I asked Madisun, and I found out that she went to college and what she's doing, and she's very articulate even in the water. And I'm deaf, so when a deaf person says you're articulate, you really must be articulate. So I just gave her a project, and the results were just great, and it just grew from there. And I just want to go on the record that I've really had two young people working closely for me in my career. So one was Mark Benioff in 1987. Mark Benioff was between his freshman and sophomore years at USC. And he has gone on to form Salesforce and one of the most successful people in the world. And I'm telling you right now that Madisun Neisver is smarter than Mark Benioff. So someday Madisun Neisver is going to be running this humongous thing. And I hope she remembers that I gave her start in tech.
What a lovely thing. And we have it recorded just in case. All right. My friend Tanya has a question. And here it comes. This one's for you, Guy.
Oh, okay. So this person is asking about, why did I respond to a cold email? And there's a lot of answers to this. So on one hand, I given my feelings of obligation to help others, I read my email and I even answer them. And I some people have video games. I have email. That's my entertainment. So I respond to a lot of email. I believe in helping people. I also believe in karma. I believe that many times I've helped people who, most people would have blown off. But over the course of my career, I could tell you, I helped a lot of people just rather indiscriminately, and it has paid off in spades. And just for total transparency, I have had virtual assistants, and sometimes they help me. Like Madisun helps me that way too. And so if you get a really heartfelt, long, deep, emotional, empathetic email signed by me, maybe it came from Madisun.
So I just have to chime in because I'm on the call and people might think I agree with you. I do agree with you about the ability to open doors for people. I completely disagree about the nature of cold email. There's no excuse for sending someone a cold email. The world is so connected and time is so precious. If you're not willing to put in the effort to make an email not a cold email, I don't think someone should put in the effort in getting back to you.
Well,
That's just my take on it.
I think one of the most valuable, remarkable talents is the ability to write a subject line. People have no appreciation for how powerful a subject line can be. So I will tell you, I'll give you the way to get to me. And now I'm going to get dozens of emails with subject lines like this. And then Madisun is going to respond as me. And you're going to think, oh, what a wonderful person Guy is. But I'll tell you something. If you send me a subject line that says, I really loved Think Remarkable, or I really love your podcast, or I really love the way you surf, I guarantee you'll get an answer. 100%.
Okay. And I love the way you surf, Guy. Carolyn has a question here. And I'm going to let Madisun answer it first because she has smart things to say.
It says, Guy, I'm such a huge fan and have followed your career for years. Can you provide advice on how to pick the right projects to maximize brand and drive demand? Strategy is hard. I feel like that's a Guy question.
Okay, fine. I just didn't want you to feel
Thank
edged out
you.
here. Hold on.
I appreciate that.
Guy, go for it, man.
Oh, okay. Wait, we have busted through the time limit, so I don't need to rush my answers, right?
Nope. You should do anything you want. It's your show.
Okay. So I'm going to start this answer with a story that's going to illustrate. Okay. You're good, Seth.
Everyone's good. You have the whole screen and the only person on the microphone.
All right. So, Madisun just exercised great judgment and passed the question back to me. So this reminds me of a great story that you can all use. So this physics professor was going on a book tour throughout the United States, and he would land in a city and a driver would pick him up, take him to the 3 or 4 appearances that day. So this physics professor lands, the chauffeur picks him up. They do the first 2 presentations. The chauffeur is sitting in the back, listening to the whole thing. They get to the 3rd presentation. The physics professor is just exhausted. And he says to the chauffeur, listen, you've seen me do this twice. You know what I'm going to say. Just you go up there. You be the physics professor. So the chauffeur, he's a gunslinger. He says, yeah, I can do that. So they go to the 3rd one. Chauffeur goes up. He does the presentation about the physics book, but he makes a mistake and he goes too fast. So there's too much time. So the host says, luckily we finished early. Now there's time for Q&A. So somebody steps up to the mic and asks this really deep astrophysics, quantum particle, question. And obviously the chauffeur has no idea because there's not been any impromptu Q&A. So the chauffeur, pretending to be the physics professor, says, that is such a rudimentary physics professor.
Question.
That's such a rudimentary physics question. I'm going to let my chauffeur sitting in the back answer for me. So I'm telling you this story because Madisun just punted to her chauffeur to answer that question. Okay? Which that shows you how smart Madisun is, that she doesn't make shit up. When she doesn't know the answer, she punts. That's a sign of smartness.
Guy knows enough to tell a joke instead of answering the question.
Now, after telling you that great story, I freaking forget. What was the question?
The question was, this is going to be our last question. The question was, how do you pick projects? What strategy do you bring? Because there's so many things to choose from. What's the thinking of the art of how you go about doing it?
Okay, so first of all, if there is no plan, there's no Guy Kawasaki forward-thinking plan. I just happen to fall in love with stuff. So I fell in love with the Apple II, which led me to computing. I fell in love with Twitter before Twitter was a Nazi cesspool. I fell in love with Google Plus. I mean, that was a great, social media platform. I fell in love with podcasting. I fell in love with writing. So there was never a plan to fall in love. And I just fall in love and I just start doing it. I mean, I am Carol Dweck's poster child because there's nobody who believes more in the growth mindset than me, like falling in love with podcasting or writing, or incidentally, falling in love with ice hockey at 44 and surfing at 60. So I just fall in love. That's it.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. I want to thank the two of you for joining me and for changing my life, and for the work you're going to do next. It's such a privilege to know you both. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank
Go
you,
make a ruckus,
Seth.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks,